Number 10. The Sleeping Sickness Sanctuary. European colonizers in the 1800s wanted to turn Africa's wilderness into farmland. The tsetse fly stopped them. This fly carries sleeping sickness. The disease makes you super tired, gives you fever, and makes your joints hurt. Then it messes with your brain, causing weird behavior and confusion. Without treatment, you fall into a coma and don't wake up. The tsetse fly didn't just affect humans. It was brutal to livestock. Horses, cattle, sheep, everything European settlers needed for farms. These flies created the tsetse fly belt, a force field covering a huge part of Africa. Every time colonizers brought in livestock, the flies killed them. These areas became no-go zones for colonial farming, which accidentally turned them into wildlife sanctuaries. The Serengeti, parts of the Congo Basin, huge chunks of East Africa, all preserved because of this fly. Without the tsetse fly, these places might look like Iowa today. Endless fields of crops instead of lions, elephants, and giraffes. A disease that killed thousands of people ended up saving some of Earth's most incredible ecosystems. Number 9. The milk hands that held the cure. Imagine you're living in the 1700s, and smallpox is basically the final boss of diseases. This thing is killing millions of people, leaving survivors with scars that look like they lost a fight with a cheese grater. But milkmaids seem to be immune. These milkmaids were actually famous for their perfect skin, which was kind of a big deal in a time when everyone's face looked like the surface of the moon thanks to smallpox scars. A doctor named Edward Jenner noticed the milkmaids would get these little blisters on their hands from cowpox, which is like smallpox's country cousin. Compared to smallpox, it's like getting hit with a Nerf gun instead of a cannonball. Jenner wondered if these cow blisters were actually giving the milkmaids immunity, so he does something that would probably get him arrested today. He takes some pus from a milkmaid's cowpox blister and scratches it into the arm of this 8-year-old kid named James Phipps. The kid gets a mild case of cowpox, feels crummy for a few days, then gets better. Then Jenner deliberately exposes the kid to smallpox. Nothing happens. The kid's immune. This is basically the 1700s equivalent of discovering that getting punched by a kitten protects you from getting mauled by a tiger. This discovery led to the world's first vaccine. The word vaccine actually comes from vacca, which means cow in Latin. Thanks to this discovery, smallpox went from being humanity's worst nightmare to being completely wiped out. It's the only human disease we've managed to completely eradicate. And it all started because some people noticed that dairy workers had really nice skin. Number 8. The fever that freed a nation. Imagine you're Napoleon Bonaparte, and you've sent 40,000 of your best troops to crush a slave rebellion in Haiti. You're feeling pretty confident because, well, you're Napoleon, but there's a tiny enemy waiting that's more deadly than any army, the yellow fever mosquito. Back in 1802, Napoleon wanted to restore slavery in Haiti after the slaves had fought for their freedom. He sends his brother-in-law, Charles Leclerc, with this massive army to get the job done. But these European soldiers had never encountered yellow fever before. Their bodies had no defense against it. Within months, 24,000 French soldiers were dead from this disease. Not from bullets, not from swords, but from mosquito bites. The symptoms were horrifying. Fever so high, your brain basically starts cooking. Your skin turns yellow like a banana, hence the name yellow fever. You start bleeding from everywhere. The Haitian rebels, on the other hand, had grown up with yellow fever. Many of them were immune or had better resistance to it. So while the French were dropping like flies, the Haitians kept fighting. Napoleon's brother-in-law caught yellow fever too and died. By 1803, France had lost so many soldiers to this tiny mosquito that Napoleon gave up. Haiti became the first free black republic in the world. And this failure was so expensive for Napoleon that he ended up selling the Louisiana Territory to the United States. A mosquito-borne disease literally shaped the map of North America. Number 7. The cough that created quarantine. It's 1377. And you're a sailor approaching the port of Ragusa, modern-day Dubrovnik. Your ship's been at sea for months, and all you want is to get on dry land. But there's a problem. People are dying everywhere from the Black Death. The plague is turning Europe into a giant graveyard. Cities are burning their dead in massive pits. Some towns have lost so many people they just disappear from the map. But Ragusa has a crazy idea. They force every ship to sit in the harbor for 40 days before anyone can step on shore. 40 days of waiting, watching the city from your ship, probably cursing the officials who made this rule. They called it 40 giorni, literally 40 days in Italian. It worked. While other ports were getting decimated by the plague, Ragusa stayed relatively safe. They had no idea how diseases actually spread. They figured sickness was caused by bad smells or evil spirits. They just got lucky with the 40-day period. Turns out that's longer than it takes for most diseases to show symptoms. This accidental discovery became what we now call quarantine, the same basic idea that helped us handle SARS and pretty much every other outbreak in modern history. Number 6. The virus that built the lab. Imagine it's 1949. Kids everywhere are getting paralyzed by polio. Doctors are desperate to find a cure, but they have a huge problem. Viruses can only grow inside living cells, and keeping human cells alive in a lab was impossible back then. Henrietta Lacks was a young woman who went to the hospital for a normal checkup. The doctors found she had an aggressive cancer, but her cancer cells wouldn't die. They just kept growing, something no other human cells had ever done in a lab. Scientists called these immortal cells HeLa cells, after her name. These cells were like the ultimate lab rats, but but made of human tissue. Scientists could now grow viruses in these cells and study them. They could test vaccines without putting actual humans at risk. The polio vaccine was tested on HeLa cells first. These cells have been used in over 11,000 patents. They've helped develop treatments for cancer, HIV, and countless other diseases. These cells have been to space to see how human cells react to zero gravity. They've been exposed to nuclear bombs to study radiation effects. There are now more HeLa cells in labs around the world than there were cells in Henrietta's body when she was alive. Some scientists estimate all the HeLa cells ever grown would weigh about 50 million metric tons. Henrietta died from the very cancer that made her cells immortal. Her family didn't even know about her cells being used in labs until decades later. Number 5. Mad cow disease. In the 1980s, farmers tried to save money by feeding cows other cows. They were grinding up leftover cow parts and feeding them back to cows. These recycled cow parts contained something called prions. Prions are like zombie proteins. They're not alive, but they can turn other normal proteins into zombies too. When these zombie proteins got into cows' brains, the cows started acting weird. They would stumble around like they were drunk. Then people ate infected beef. These zombie proteins jumped from cows to humans. Everyone realized our food chain was about as secure as a screen door on a submarine. This forced us to completely change how we handle meat. No more cannibal cows. We started tracking every cow like it was in a witness protection program. Where it came from, what it ate, who it hung out with. Scientists also realized we needed to watch out for other diseases that might pull the same trick. Mad cow disease was horrible, but it accidentally made us way better at keeping our food safe. It's like getting food poisoning at your favorite restaurant and then finding out they hired Gordon Ramsay to fix their kitchen. Number 4. The plague that paid a living wage. The year is 1347, and Europe is about to have the worst decade ever. The Black Death shows up and starts taking out about 1 in every 3 people, but with fewer people around, workers became valuable. Imagine you're a medieval farmer. Yesterday, your boss could replace you with any of the 100 peasants waiting in line for your job. Now half your coworkers are dead, and your boss is sweating. He's offering you better pay, better hours, and maybe even a nice cottage to live in. Peasants who used to earn barely enough to eat were now getting paid up to 5 times more. Some even started their own businesses. The nobles and kings weren't happy about this. They tried passing laws to force people to work for pre-plague wages, but you can't enforce those laws when a third of your workforce is wiped out. What are you gonna do? Fire the only guy who knows how to run your farm? This accidental pay raise created Europe's first middle class. People could suddenly afford better food, better clothes, and even some luxury items. Number 3. The typhus that toppled an emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. The biggest army Europe has ever seen. 600,000 men ready to march on Moscow. But there's a tiny enemy he didn't count on. Something smaller than a grain of rice, the body louse. These little guys were carrying typhus, and they were about to rewrite history. Napoleon's soldiers were marching through mud, sleeping in crowded camps, and rarely changing their clothes. Perfect conditions for lice to spread. By the time Napoleon's army reached Moscow, typhus had taken out more of his men than Russian bullets. 400,000 soldiers down. That's like losing the entire population of Miami to bugs you can barely see. High fever, horrible headaches, and a rash that spread across their bodies. When Napoleon finally reached Moscow, he found it empty. The Russians had burned their own city rather than surrender it. But by then, it didn't matter. His army was already decimated. When Napoleon's army retreated, they left a trail of corpses that spread typhus across Europe. He might have conquered Russia. The entire map of Europe today could look completely different. Number 2. The disease that proved germs exist. Imagine it's 1885, and you're walking down a street in Paris when suddenly a dog with foam dripping from its mouth bites you. Back then, this was basically a death sentence. Rabies was the stuff of nightmares. Once symptoms showed up, you had a 100% chance of dying. The virus would climb up your nerves to your brain, turning you aggressive, making you terrified of water, and causing you to foam at the mouth. It was like becoming a zombie, but worse because you were aware of what was happening. Louis Pasteur was about to change everything. The popular belief was that illness came from foul air or angry spirits. Pasteur was like, nah, it's tiny living things, germs. People thought he was crazy, invisible creatures making us sick. Sounds like something you'd come up with after too much French wine. But Pasteur had a plan. He took the rabies virus and weakened it by drying out infected rabbit spinal cords. It's like he was making a training dummy for the immune system. Then one day, a 9-year-old kid named Joseph Meister shows up at his lab. The poor kid had been bitten by a rabid dog 14 times. Pasteur knew this was his chance to prove his theory. He injected Joseph with his experimental vaccine every day for 13 days. Everyone waited for the kid to either die from rabies or from Pasteur's crazy treatment. Plot twist: Joseph lived. This wasn't just a win for Joseph. It was a slam dunk for germ theory. Suddenly, people had to admit that maybe Pasteur wasn't crazy after all. This changed everything we knew about medicine. So next time you're at the doctor getting a shot, thank that terrifying rabies virus. Without it, we might still be trying to cure diseases by smelling flowers or whatever. Number 1. The blood's twisted shield. Imagine your body is like a fortress, and your blood cells are the guards. Most people's blood cells are like perfect little donuts, floating around doing their job, but some people have blood cells that look like someone sat on them. They're all bent and twisted into a crescent shape. This is called sickle cell disease, and at first glance it seems like nature's cruel joke. These twisted cells can cause a lot of problems. They get stuck in blood vessels like a traffic jam during rush hour. They break apart easier than normal blood cells, like cheap plastic toys, and they don't live as long as regular blood cells. It's like they're working with half a battery, but this defect is actually a superhero cape in disguise. There's this nasty parasite called malaria. It's like a tiny vampire that invades your blood cells, and turns them into parasite factories. Malaria has killed more humans throughout history than all wars combined, but these twisted sickle cells are like kryptonite to malaria. When the malaria parasite tries to invade a sickle cell, it's like trying to break into a house that's already collapsed. The parasite gets confused, can't set up shop, and eventually dies. So in areas where malaria was a huge problem, like parts of Africa, people with this defect had a better chance of survival. A disease that causes problems actually protected millions of people from something even worse. It's like having a grumpy guard dog that sometimes bites you but keeps the burglars away.